Judge gives Ripple partial win in SEC case over XRP currency. Ripple Labs, Inc. violated federal securities law in its sale of cryptocurrency XRP directly to sophisticated investors, but its sales on public exchanges did not involve securities. A U.S. judge said in a ruling that sent the cryptocurrency soaring. XRP was up 25% after the ruling.
So you're not going to figure this out in real time. This is too complicated. The bottom line is that the headline is...
Well, I just want to make sure the audience gets it, yeah.
Look, the headline is, I'm reading the tweet, Ripple sales of XRP do not constitute offer of investment contracts, according to Judge. They won.
They won.
This is a huge vindication for them. And the XRP is ripping 35%.
Yeah. And it really handcuffs the SEC. What are they going to do about Coinbase and every other exchange? I mean, if they're not selling securities, I think Coinbase and everybody else has always maintained they're selling tokens. This was the fulcrum argument for the SEC, and they just lost.
The whole crypto market is ripping right now.
It's an interesting one. The confounding part of this is that the initial sale to accredited investors and hedge funds was done that they violated securities law there when they were selling directly to sophisticated investors. Just looking at it logically, you would think it was the reverse. But this is a fascinating turn of events.
I just texted with Brad Garlinghouse, and he says, yes, it does mean that they won. And he feels
vindicated
and really happy about the...
How do you feel, J-Cal?
Well, I feel like I'm going to launch J-Coin and sell a token to back startups. I mean, if it's a free-for-all
I won't tell you what he said about you,
J-Cal.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I've said from the beginning...
You were accusing these guys of security fraud for like the last several years.
Well, they've been convicted of securities fraud here. So it's a two-part judgment. Ripple violated federal securities law in its sale of cryptocurrency, the first line of the story. There's two judgments here. They violated federal securities law in its sale of cryptocurrency XRP directly to sophisticated investors, but the sales on public exchanges did not involve securities. So what they're saying is, if you sold XRP to hedge funds, that was a security when they did the first offering. But when the public started trading it on public exchanges, they did not have, according to the Howey test, this belief.
But that's where their vulnerability was, because if you sell to a professional hedge fund, they're accredited.
That should not be an issue. You should be able to sell to accredited.
Right. So what's the problem? This is exoneration for them.
The judge says they lost
sound pretty happy, and the market seems to be indicating that this is... I mean, would you say the price is up 35%?
Well, I mean, listen, the public...
Up to 37% right now.
Crypto trades, I wouldn't necessarily put too much on it. I would look at the actual judgment here, but we all know people trade headlines, so let's see where it's at in 5 days. But
a bunch of the altcoins are ripping right now.
Oh boy, here we go.
It's a judgment that seems to indicate for a lot of folks that these are not going to be treated as securities. I think that this is a really important... Just think about how amazing the United States is, that the government agencies, the administration in power, can come after corporations. And then we have a court system that can adjudicate and make decisions that follow the rule of law. I know we're going to talk about Lina Khan and her agency's efforts at litigation, but I'm really encouraged at the fact that the court system in the United States doesn't just kowtow to whatever administration is in power at that moment, that they do adjudicate by the law and ultimately provide greater clarity for business, for individuals to operate going forward. That there is a better sense now for the market. There's a better sense now for individuals on what is and isn't appropriate.
Somehow, or have they always?
Well, it's a check and balance, right?
It's a check and balance, and I think that's what's so great is that there's now clarity because the courts provided that. Yeah.
Has this trend changed? I thought America always did that.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think it's because you obviously have a very zealous administration and a very zealous agency leader who is testing the boundaries. And Lina Khan's agency is pushing the limits on what constitutes antitrust. And in the effort to try and push those boundaries, there is a pushback from the courts.
No, but in crypto, it's been Gensler in the SEC.
And it's been Gensler in the SEC. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm talking, but both agencies, right? And so it's good to see that there's clarity emerging and that the courts do their job and that the administrations come in.
Well, I think the Lina Khan thing is very different. I think this was a nuanced argument that the SEC made that required a highly sophisticated interpretation of securities law. And you're supposed to go to the courts for that. I think what the FTC has been doing is basically just emotionally reactive lawsuit filing.
All right, so let me just pivot over to Lina Khan's losing streak here. On Tuesday morning, a federal judge denied the FTC's attempt to delay Microsoft's $70 billion acquisition of Activision Blizzard. And the FTC's argument was basically Microsoft should not be allowed to acquire Activision because it would make Activision's core assets, which is basically Call of Duty, one of the greatest franchises in the history of franchises, movies or television shows or video games, and that it would be exclusive to the Xbox. Satya Nadella and Xbox head Phil Spencer both said under oath they could not make COD an exclusive, and they wouldn't. And not only that, they said they would allow it.
No, it made no sense. I mean,
they also said they would put it on Nintendo.
Of course, because Nintendo and Sony are the number one and number two players in this market, and Sony alone is basically 50% of the market. So I think like the crazy thing about all of this is if you look at the legal strategy of the FTC, it's basically that they view themselves as a hammer, and every deal, particularly if it's done by big tech, is a nail. And so, Amazon Roomba, lawsuit. Facebook, some rando little company, lawsuit. Microsoft Activision, lawsuit. And it's that emotional reactivity that takes away faith and trust that this organization is intelligent and sober and well run. And that's the shame of it. Because if you actually look across all of the deals in tech that have happened recently, this deal was frankly DOA from the start from a regulatory blocking perspective because of what I just said. The number 3 player, a distant third, buying an asset. Why would you take an asset that you pay $70 billion for and immediately turn it off from 50% of all consoles? Nobody would do that.
Hey, Sachs, when we look at this, and let's widen this aperture to the faith in institutions, because we have the Gary Gensler. Hey, do we actually believe that they're acting in good faith, or are they trying to protect fiat currency and not let an alternative currency take some control and sort of be a backstop against their behavior in the money printing machine, which is crypto's, big sort of, let's call it the bology position. And then in this case, Lina Khan was selected, handpicked as a 32-year-old wonder kid who had this incredible thesis that she could predict who would compete in the future. She was like a Minority Report precog. She alone could decide, how these competitions would emerge, and she keeps losing. So these two institutions now being used for political purposes by the Biden administration, or do you think that they're just poorly executing? What's your take?
Well, I think clearly the legal strategy that Lina Khan has been pursuing is not having much success in the courts. I mean, she just lost this big decision on the Microsoft acquisition of Activision. But that being said, I'm almost starting to feel bad for her because although some of her legal theories may be flawed, I do think that these big tech companies like Google and Microsoft do need a check on their power. And so what I would urge is that Lina Khan needs to regroup, maybe figure out a different legal strategy, figure out a different way to take on big tech, because someone does need to cut these big tech companies down to size. They are giant monopolies, and they do need to be restrained and controlled, or they will basically consolidate the whole tech ecosystem and abuse their market power. So I think it's actually pretty vital that we have a regulator who is energetic in wanting to check the power of big tech. I think maybe trying to put a damper on M&A was the wrong way to do it. We've talked about this before.
Yeah, it needs to be more surgical, right?
There's so few ways to have a good exit in the tech industry that when you take away M&A, it puts a damper on all risk-taking and the deployment of risk capital into the ecosystem. So I think it was having too big of a chilling effect. So I think she needs to move away from these M&A cases, unless it's a very, very clear case. But I think where she can be more aggressive is on restraining anti-competitive tactics and also maybe busting up these companies. I'm thinking more and more about this Google case that she has where she wants to basically break up the company because they've got this monopoly, not just in search, but also in advertising. Maybe that's a good thing. And maybe Amazon should have to spin out AWS. Maybe Google should have to spin out YouTube, because I do think they are abusive in the way they exercise their authority. As a small example, over the past week, YouTube just banned a video of Jordan Peterson interviewing RFK Jr. Why? What gives them the power to interfere in our democracy that way, where they just decide for their own reasons